What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another highly combustible reaction. We're jumping back into the next one on our Simon Whistler journey. This man can talk to you about anything whatsoever, and you will pay attention. Chernobyl's a new safe confinement, part 2, the world's largest movable object. Let's jump in. Let's check it out together. If you enjoy it, get over show mega projects, all the love of the world. Go show all of the rest of Simon's channels the love. They're all right down there, and they're all equally intriguing and interesting. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is. You want to learn more when you hear him talk. Let's jump in, finish it off. I hope you went and watched the rest of it without me yesterday. Let's go.
And eventually set the foundations for the new safe confinement. Office blocks were built to house those working on the project that would last for another 20 years. The sheer scale of just preparing to get started with the project's incredible. To put this in perspective, there were over 300 separate sub-projects that needed to be addressed to achieve one common goal: making the area safe. They were broken down into 5 objectives. Number 1, decreasing the probability of collapse. Number 2, mitigating the consequences of a possible collapse. Number 3, improving nuclear safety. Number 4, improving human and environmental safety. And number 5, a strategy and feasibility study to turn the site into an environmentally friendly area. Now, many of the sub-projects further had to be broken down in a careful set of stages so as not to cause problems in other areas. And don't forget, this all needs to be done next to radiation levels which, if not properly managed, can easily be deadly. Many people believe that outside the structure itself, this was one of the most complex building sites in history. While preparation work had been ongoing at Chernobyl for nearly 10 years, it wasn't until 2007 that Vinci Construction Grand's projects and Bouygues Travaux Publics, not sure about the French pronunciation there, announced that they would partner with Navaka to construct the Chernobyl new safe confinement. The estimated cost for the project was 432 million euros, but as you might imagine, things got just a little bit higher and it ended up costing over 2 billion euros. At the time,
I was expecting him to say billion in the first place. I wasn't expecting him to say a million. It sounds like $1 billion and up project.
It was thought that it would take 53 months to fully plan, build, and install, with an estimated finish date sometime in 2012. Pretty sure when I visited in 2017 or 18, it wasn't done yet. It had definitely been slowed over, but work was still ongoing. Yes, because the structure was only finished in 2019. While on traditional building sites there are numerous potential risks that need to be addressed, nothing can quite compare to what those workers faced at Chernobyl. While radiation at ground level is low enough that most workers can remain there for around 40 hours a week, levels climb significantly the higher you are. With this in mind, an innovative system using enormous jacks was devised to ensure that the workers never needed to be above 30 meters. It was much safer, but it would take considerably longer. There are sensors throughout the building constantly measuring radiation levels, while individuals carry 2 dosimeters which do the same thing. And when I visited Chernobyl to go and wander around and see what was about, you're given one of these dosimeters, only one, and it just measures kind of your acute exposure. One of these measures is that acute one, it just measures short-term exposure, and they've got another one which measures long-term exposure because both of these can be fatal. For some examples, if you went out onto the roof of Chernobyl where they were throwing the debris off previously, when it actually happened, you could spend just 12 minutes there, and that would be an entire year's worth of acceptable radiation exposure. The rules were very simple. If your dosimeter goes over the daily or weekly limit that your body can healthily take, you're just finished until further notice. It was a far cry from the thousands of men who were sent to the roofs back in 1986. On February the 13th, 2012, the first sections began arriving on the site after their long journey. Much of the structure had been pre-assembled in Italy, and a total of 18 ships and 2,500 lorries had been needed to transport it all to Chernobyl. On the 24th of November that same year, work began to hoist pieces into the air. What we see today, it looks like one single arch, but it's actually 2 separate arches. This was a decision taken to mitigate the vast challenges involved in lifting such a giant structure. Building 2 arches and joining them together, it was basically just seen as significantly easier than building a single arch. The eastern section was the first to be completed, but because of height restrictions people could work at, it was this long and difficult process. These enormous jacks, they were mounted on 10 specifically installed towers, and basically they hoisted the giant steel structure skywards. The jacks had really only been used in a real-world situation once before to raise the sunken Russian submarine, the Kursk, from the seabed.
Hey, we've seen the raising of the Kursk. We know about those.
In 2001. Not so many uses for giant jacks. The first section of the Eastern Arch, which was actually the very top, was initially raised to 22 meters and locked in place so that the construction could continue with the workers safely under the 30-meter limit. In June 2013, the structure was again lifted, but just 5 meters so the lower sections could be added. Finally, on the 15th and 16th of September 2013, the arch was raised to its final height of 110 meters and work was completed on the side segments. At this point, the structure weighed a hefty 9,968 tons. The external arch was then pushed back on the rails 112 meters from the erection zone to the waiting zone, just in front of reactor number 4. The western section followed exactly the same pattern, but as things tend to be the second time around, it moved at a considerably quicker pace and was constructed and raised in just 7 months. Once completed, this section was again rolled backwards, and on the 4th of October 2015, the final bolts were tightened to unite the eastern and western arches. A total of 650 specifically designed bolts were used to fuse the giant structure together. On the 29th of November 2016, the mighty structure began its short final route. Despite being just 300 meters away, the process of rolling it back over the reactor and sarcophagus took 5 days to complete, with the front and back sections being added after essentially sealing everything inside. After more than 20 years
at the end of that 5 days, they were like, thank God it's over.
of planning and construction, the structure was at last complete. And what a structure it had become. 36,000 tons is pretty difficult for a human brain to consider, but if you combined 2 Brooklyn bridges and 1 Eiffel Tower, you might just be there. Its vast steel paneling on the outside covers 86,000 square meters, but underneath, the numbers are equally impressive. A total of 650,000 bolts were needed, along with an additional 5,700 main components, mostly piping, and 4,000 auxiliary components, mainly joint connections. If we move further down, the whole structure sits on 81,000 cubic meters of reinforced concrete, with 400 concrete piles driven 24 meters down, which add a lot of further stability. In terms of the number of those who have worked on the project, it's difficult to get a firm figure, but at least 10,000 people have participated in some aspect of the new safe confinement, including planners, specialist cleaners.
Shout out to them.
But as I said, this has
hardcore.
always been more than just a building project. At least 50 people are always on site whose sole job is monitoring the radioactive levels. On the 3rd of July 2019, the new safe confinement was opened to international media, with many eager to finally set eyes on a project that had begun nearly 30 years before. It was of course no secret what was being constructed. Everyone knew about this, indeed I went to see it, but the Ukrainian governments had limitations in place for members of the public visiting Chernobyl ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. It wasn't a building site that you could really get a good look at. However, despite the fanfare, the completion of the structure merely signaled the start of the next stage in a much larger plan. One of the most significant challenges that still remains is to remove the concrete sarcophagus as well as some of the damaged reactor. The sarcophagus actually rests on parts of the reactor building, which itself was badly damaged during the meltdown. During the construction of the sarcophagus, steel beams had been lowered from helicopters, but not attached properly, leaving a structural nightmare. Minor repairs have been needed to keep the shaky structure standing while the new safe confinement was completed. The structure needed to be airtight, not simply to prevent radioactive particles escaping naturally, but in the worst case scenario of the reactor and sarcophagus collapsing, the dust would be completely sealed inside, preventing a further disaster. As I mentioned briefly earlier, the total cost of this project came to 2.1 billion euros. Now, it's difficult to compare it to other structures because simply there's nothing quite like it. It was more expensive than the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world.
And a pretty impressive building at that, if you've ever been up to the observatory. When all of the other skyscrapers in the area are dwarfed by where you're at, yeah.
And certainly not
That's
cheap
a lot of
1.3
material.
billion euros. However, it pales in comparison to China's Three Gorges Dam, which cost 33.5 billion euros, and make sure you're subscribed to this channel because that's coming up. And while we're on the subject of finance, this was certainly an act of international cooperation. A lot of people chipped in to build it. Unfortunately, the Soviet Union, who were sort of responsible for the disaster, weren't really around to clear up their mess. The operation has currently received contributions from 54 different countries and organizations from around the world. The largest single contributor has come from the European Union, which pledged nearly 400 million euros, with individual European nations also contributing separately as well. The US has donated the most of any single country, with 240 million euros.
We like to give money away, the US does.
As I said earlier, this is not an impressive building simply because of its size and its scale. While it's easy to marvel at this wonderful structure from the outside, in the future, the work done on the inside will be considered vastly more important. Initial estimates say that the sarcophagus could be completely removed by 2023, with each part needing to be extensively cleaned before disposal or recycling. But even after the completion of the new safe confinement and the projected removal of the sarcophagus, scientists still estimate that the cleanup process involving vacuuming radioactive particles and dealing with the lava mixture left over from the Soviet cleanup process will likely go on until at least 2065. When you think about it, it's quite incredible. I was born in 1987, so just a year after Chernobyl happened, and that is essentially a full human lifetime, of disaster cleanup. The cost of the ongoing work will eventually eclipse the building work by at least 5 times, with Ukrainian officials estimating a yearly operating budget of 55 million euros for the structure. Even the arches installed have a lifespan of only 100 years, so inevitably this will not be a construction that can remain indefinitely. Who knows what may come next and what humanity may dream up in response to this awful disaster. Unless we discover a way of removing the radioactive waste completely, the new safe confinement is likely to need rebuilding or altering for hundreds, if not thousands of years to come. It may need to become one of Earth's most enduring structures. So this has been Mega Project.
I got chills when he said that. 100%.
A little bit dark, this one, considering all of the, death and horror from Chernobyl. If you haven't seen that HBO miniseries, definitely worth a watch. Also, worth subscribing to this channel, smashing that like button, all of that good stuff. And we'll be back really soon.
It is 100% worth it to get over to show Mega Projects all the love of the world. Go show Simon Whistler the love on all of his channels. The links are all right there inside of the description. Amazing, amazing, amazing learning experience that we just went through. Loads of work. Loads and loads of work. Shout out to all of the workers that have done anything with that disaster cleanup. The world is going to thank you for it down the line, 100%, even if they don't know about it now. Smash the like button if you liked it, the dislike button, but I won't believe you. Till the next one, I'm Mildly Combustible. You guys be happy, healthy, stable. Let me to the moon, the back. Peace.